Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along on this lovely evening. This is a much nicer place to be here than anywhere else. In the event of an emergency, there are no practices planned at all, but if the alarm does sound, please make your way down the main staircase and gather out in the car park. All public meetings are recorded and they will be published on the Council's website. Toilets available on every floor. Discreet use of mobile phones is welcomed, but you are asked to keep them silent and not to use voice or camera flash functions. Please use microphones at all times. I'll just go around and do some quick introductions. I'm Councillor Beverly Davies. I'm Councillor for the Prettygate Ward and I'm Chair of this scrutiny panel. Shall we go round to my right-hand side?
Thank you. I'm Marcus Harrington, Councillor for West Burgolt and 8 Ash Green.
I'm Ansley Hardy, Councillor for Christchurch.
Can we do that again? Yeah. Patricia Moore, Councillor for West Mersey.
Chris Pearson, Peerchurch. Mike Hogg, St Anne's.
Justin Knight, Old Heath.
Nick Cope, Christchurch.
Jonathan Baker, Democratic Services Officer.
Pam Donnelly, Executive Director.
Thank you very much. Substitutions. Councillor Knight.
Councillor Knight substituting for Councillor Peter Higgins.
Thank you. Everyone else is here present and correct. We have no urgent items. Declarations of interest from anyone? No, everyone's fairly silent on that one. Minutes, confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of June. That's on pages 9 to 14. Everyone happy with those who was here? Yep, excellent. Thank you very much. Agreed. I haven't been notified of anybody who wants to have your say this evening. If there is anybody, can they make themselves known, please? No, that's excellent. No decisions taken under special urgency, none under call-in. Items requested by members of the panel and other members. We haven't. Do we have anything on 10A? No. 10B. We have a speaker. We have Councillor Willits, please.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm making a request that the scrutiny panel should look at certain aspects of the operations of First Sight, if First Sight is so willing to allow us to look at those operations. It was reported in the press that there was a significant ex gratia payment to the outgoing managing director of First Sight, and there was concern expressed by the papers, the people of Colchester, and I'm aware that we give First Sight a grant of £142,000 a year, and I think there would be concern if any part of our grant had been used in the payoff, because that is not what we intended. Now, we scrutinised the arts organisations. Should have been the 3, but it was only 2 principal arts organisations on the 17th of March this year. First Sight did not attend for reasons that I guess became self-explanatory when there were senior management changes at First Sight. But nevertheless, we also lost the opportunity to scrutinise First Sight with or without the issue of was our grant misused in any way. So my request is that that the panel gives consideration to scrutinising First Sight and in particular the matter of the grant, to see whether public funds were used by the trustees in the payoff. I'm sure, because I was present on the 17th of March, that we were given an assurance that we would be scrutinising First Sight within 6 months. Looking through your forward programme, I don't see it anywhere, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you know, it does appear that issues which might be convenient to some are dropping off the scrutiny agenda. I would therefore request the panel to include the scrutiny of First Sight, and in particular the matter of the payoff as a matter of urgency. Now I know we cannot force First Sight to attend, but I think an invitation should be extended as quickly as possible, and we should get them to the table at the earliest possible opportunity to explain how our grant was used. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willits. I'd like you to rest assured that there will be nothing that falls off the end of our work programme on my watch. And trust me, if I smell any sort of conspiracy theory, it will definitely be on there. We have there have been overtures made to First Sight. They have been contacted, and I understand that we're just looking for a date at the moment to confirm. So that will definitely happen, hopefully sooner rather than later. But we're just getting the dates together. There is a new chairman on board now, so I think it should be a lot easier to get that sorted, to get that date in the diary. And as regards to the ex gratia payment, we will be looking to include that within the scoping document that we give them, because obviously we'll give them a bit of a brief as to what we're looking for. It's not just going to be an open book. Well, it will be an open book, but there will be specific things that we want to know and specific questions to ask. So I would be looking to include that within it. Councillor Hedges, was there anything you wanted to come and say? No? Oh, sorry. I do apologise. I've told you my head's not back in where home.
I forgive you. It's Anne Hedges. Thank you. Just to confirm what Councillor Davies has said, actually, that Anthony Roberts, the interim managing director at First Sight, is actually very keen to come, and I know that he will make himself as available as possible for the next suitable meeting that fits in with your work programme. So he's really keen to come, and I'm sure he'll be supported by the new chair who was officially appointed last week. I don't believe they've announced him yet, but I have today suggested that they might like to do that as quickly as possible. So I would also suggest that he is invited to your meeting. Just in terms of the specifics of the question that Councillor Willits has asked, we do have an SLA with First Sight, and that will form part of the papers that will come when they come for scrutiny, so that you can see exactly what our funding is used for, and certainly the ex gratia payment that was made to the director did not form part of that SLA agreement for the last financial year. But clearly, those questions can be answered. However, I'm conscious that Anthony Robertson, the new chair, won't have that history. So it may be useful for me to try to get something in advance of that scrutiny meeting, just to cover off that particular issue, if that would be helpful.
That's lovely. Thanks very much. Definitely be doing a good piece of scrutiny on First Sight. Councillor Cope, did you want to?
It was chiefly who took the decision to make the ex gratia payment. I mean,
well, I think this is something we can't go into now. This is just going to be. This will be coming around as they come to scrutiny. But those are the kind of questions that will be flushed out when we can. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Councillor Willits. Work programme, item 11. Because I only got back from holiday yesterday. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to look through the forward plan and compare it with last month's. I'm sure everyone is really, really pleased about that because I can't have a moan. But I'm sure I'll be back on top of it next month. As regards to the work programme, the only thing that I can see missing off there is First Sight. And obviously if there's anything else comes up as and when during the year, we have got some space there, which is quite good. So if anyone would like to put their thinking caps on, and if there's anything that anyone has a burning desire to scrutinise, come to us with the reasons and the history and whatever, and we can have a look at it. On to... Now, if it's, I have had a request from Councillor Corey to bring the item 13 and 14 next. If that's okay. They shouldn't take too long. I understand he has a pressing engagement. So if we move on to item 13, the budget strategy, medium-term financial forecast and budget timetable, page 59. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Tina. Hopefully we won't delay you too long, but I appreciate you moving me up the agenda. I didn't want to take too much time because this report has been scrutinised at Cabinet as well, and questions were asked there in detail, and I did give my answers then. I also gave an answer to Councillor Winnetts at full council, which kind of suggested that I had already answered it as well. But there are some key points in this report that I would like you to look at, but I'm not going to make it a political stance tonight. I just want to refer you to a few key issues, and otherwise I will then pass it over to Sean to continue on.
Trust me, Councillor Corey, if you start making political points, I will shut you up.
Well, the only
nicely, of course.
Thank you. The only point I'd say is it's a good report, and it's sound in its financial sort of management. What I just want to say is that to look at a number of points, for example, let me just check. 3.5 in the report just outlines the way in which we're going to spend our surplus of £471,000 and the type of sort of principles that we want to follow. Also in 3.4 it outlines some of the extra funding areas where we feel we have cost. We have to look at the risks that are coming in, especially with the new government, some of the risks that come on board, but also ways in which we are looking to spend money in areas such as the town walls on heritage, locality budgets for councillors, and making sure we actually ensure that our surplus is helping all the people in the borough. I believe those are the key points. The only other point is 4.17. That just outlines the government funding that we expect with a 13% cut again. So we are in difficult times, but we are getting through them, and we are trying to ensure that any surpluses we do have are spent across the whole borough. I'll hand over to Sean now and leave it there, but I remain here for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I was going to be fairly brief as well in terms of introducing the actual report. I think it's positioning this paper. It's the first report for the 16-17 budget cycle, and the extra detailed budget will come to you as a panel in January. So there's an opportunity to look at the forecast for 16-17 and the Cabinet's approach to the budget strategy for 16-17 as well. And then you'll see all the detail later on in January, because it'll be worked on from this point forward, and Cabinet will obviously consider the budget position. So just one or two of the key points I'd add. In terms of budget forecast for 16-17, in section 4 of the report, we're currently showing a potential gap of £534,000. There's clearly a number of assumptions behind that gap. So those are all set out in section 4. So again, some of the key ones, as already mentioned, one of the key items there is we're assuming at the moment about a 13% reduction in our core government funding. So that's mostly regarding the government grant that we actually receive, or we expect to receive. Clearly, we don't know exactly what that will be yet. The spending review expected to be announced in the autumn. So until then, we won't really know exactly what any reduction will be. That's a working assumption is how I would actually regard it, therefore. But clearly, we're expecting a reduction. It's just a question of how much it is. Then again, there's clearly assumptions regarding inflation. And I suppose regarding savings, again, just to comment that there are some savings already built into the budget gap. So in coming up with a gap of about £500,000, there are savings set out at 4.14 regarding for the council's commercial work, where we're looking at increasing income from all our for assets and our trading services, and also looking at our business processes. So again, there are savings already built in, but clearly there will be more that we will have to actually find. In terms of council tax, it's a working assumption here again of a freeze in council tax. That's set out within the actual report. In terms of therefore delivering the budget, so we have a gap from 4.24 in the report on page 66, sets out some of the key areas proposed to actually look at in terms of closing the budget gap. And one of them, which again links into the outturn report, which you had at your previous meeting, is that we're going to carry out a review that actually looks at where we've ended up in the budget position for the last actually 3 years, and compare that to the budget set to see if if there are areas that potentially we over budget on certain costs. Are there areas that basically we always underspend? So we'll review all the budgets to be sure that they are robust. And again, we envisage that it could be potentially, we may well be able to find some savings through that actually exercise. As also set out there as well, where again, we're going to go through and confirm the extra savings and incomes on the commercial activities and some other budget areas we're looking at. Then finally, just to sort of conclude on the housing housing revenue account, again just setting out that all the detailed budget work will come forward in January, but it's informed by the HRA business plan, which is currently in place, although it will be necessary to obviously review that for any changing assumptions. In terms of medium-term financial forecast, still showing further budget gaps in later years. And again, these are positioned based on assumptions which we'll refine during the actual year. The key factor, again, being assumed reductions in government funding, though. And then the rest of the paper just sets out the position regarding our reserves and balances which we hold, and all the capital programme, just an overall summary of the capital programme position as well. Obviously happy to answer any detailed questions on the paper, but as I say, it's the first paper you see, and there will be further ones to Cabinet and further reports that will also come here for pre-scrutiny as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. One of the things I would just ask is, do you consider the savings and income stated to be reasonable? Last year there was a massive underestimation there, which sort of kind of threw things out at the end of the year, but in a positive way. If that had been worked in a little bit more during the year, then maybe the financial position could have been different. Are the savings and the income that have been forecast reasonable assumptions?
Just before I answer, can I just check, are you talking about the savings incomes that we've got in for 16-17? Yeah. Well, say at the moment, those assumptions are based on detailed projections behind those. So whilst just some high-level figures regarding commercial and business processes, there's quite a lot of detail behind them. We're still, as it says here in the report, one of the parts of the budget is to actually confirm those. So before they come forward in the final budget proposals, we will make certain that they are deliverable in 16-17. At the moment, I believe they all are, based on our projections. But as I say, we'll review those before the final budget proposals come forward.
Thank you. On page 62, this is under financial year 15-16. We're looking at the Disabled Facilities Grant, funding a temporary staffing resource to manage the backlog of cases. How many cases are on the backlog and how long do you envisage that taking to clear? And then it's also saying as a result of ceasing to use the Home Improvement Agency, so why was that ceased and who's being used now? There's kind of 4 questions there, really.
Yes, I wish I had 3 or 4 answers then for you, really. I haven't got the detail behind that. I mean, actually, this was included in the previous report, actually, the outturn, that this particular proposal was going forward. And I think at that time I did have some information, but I'm afraid I haven't got it to hand at the moment. I'm happy to take that away and to email a response around, get for the relevant officer to draft a response and email it round to the panel if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Because I remember asking that time there was an underspend, I think, of about 200,000 on the Disabled Facilities Grant. And when I asked why that was still green, showing as green and not red, because it was such a huge underspend. And I think I was told that it was because of the profiling or whatever. Whereas now, obviously, there was a backlog, so I'm assuming that money wasn't spent.
Certainly in terms of the capital programme, because disabled facilities grants form part of the overall capital programme. I know that we were again reprofiling some of that spend. Some of it is sometimes it's the lead-in time to process the applications, but also clearly this is one of the proposals here was acknowledging we needed some more resource to help in the processing. I think rather than me try to give you any more information, I take it away and ask the relevant officer and draft a response up. But we are taking, or it's either that or I can include it, if you like, you'll receive 2 reports in the next cycle of meetings. One's on the capital programme, which will include disabled facilities grants. I can include it as part of that if that's easier and acceptable.
Thank you. Gareth, did you want to come up and say something?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of a couple of aspects of the questions you asked, the responsibility within the Council for managing the Home Improvement Agency service actually sits in Beverly Jones's service, but it's something that we have a lot of conversations around from a housing point of view. There were in excess of 100 cases passed back from Swan, who are the provider of the Home Improvement Agency service. We reached a point where we were very unhappy with the quality of the service that Swan were providing. It's a service that is commissioned by Essex County Council. Essex are currently looking at recommissioning that provision, but it's fair to say in the north of Essex, which is where Swan had the contract, there has been a general concern from the local authorities about the quality of the work that's been done. So Beverly Jones's team are in the process right now of managing that backlog of cases and getting us to a position where we can once again get a proper service delivered for customers in Colchester. So that's the reference to the ceasing of the service. It was a joint decision between ourselves and the County Council. And in terms of the financial question that you asked, as you're aware from previous discussions you've had, there are some cases that come through the Home Improvement Agency which are for very significant projects, can be 15 to 20, 30,000 pounds in terms of large extensions. And so some of those come through as large lumps in the process. The reason essentially for the profile of the spend is simply that we had a service that was not performing, and so we've had to get our arms around that and try and improve that. But the profile is also affected by the fact that there's a large volume of small value cases, but some very significant cases coming through, and they come through in lumps. But as I said, it's an unfortunate situation that I know Beverly and the team are working our way out of as we speak.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from Councillor Harrington?
Thank you, Chair. It's for Councillor Corey, if I can, please, and it's a carry forward from last scrutiny panel meeting. And in the agenda tonight, you got straight to point 3.5. And the fourth bullet point there is improving the presentation in the town centre. You've got all this lovely £471,000 worth of money. And at our last meeting, a member of the public suggested wrought iron welcome to the lanes gate, to make our, in particular the lanes area of our town, more welcoming and attractive, and more flower boxes as well. You did say you'd take those matters away and discuss them with your colleagues in Cabinet. I can't get to all the Cabinet meetings because of other commitments. I know you've had a Cabinet meeting since then. I wondered if you could just update us with your progress to these lovely welcoming signs and flower boxes, please.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I can't update you much more. I can't give you a welcoming answer as such, but what we are looking into is different ways to make the town centre look more presentable. And one of those ideas, for example, was to do with signage and was to do with making it easier to get around the town, but promoting our town at the same time, promoting the heritage. So these ideas are being discussed at the Cabinet at the moment, and it does take a while to lead into these ideas coming through. We are really keen on improving the town centre. We do think it's the jewel in our crown. So those kind of ideas are being discussed. I promise you they are being discussed. And once again, I will, and Tina can back me up, I'll bring up your ideas and we'll see how far we can get with them. And Mr Chilvers brought up some good ideas at the time. And I think that we are, because we've financially managed the budget well, we've got this potential to invest more into the town centre, and I think that is the best way forward. So I do appreciate your ideas. They are being discussed. I can't fully tell you yet what ideas we are going to definitely agree upon. We have to be responsible in how we spend the money. We can't sort of go around making everything look presentable and miss out on actually some of the key areas where people are maybe losing out in this day and age. And for example, last time I spoke about businesses as well and how we need to ensure we incubate and improve upon what we provide for businesses. So the presentation is good, yet some of the nitty-gritty stuff needs to be done too. So I will definitely speak to you as soon as I can about how, when an idea comes forward, when the Cabinet has agreed on it, I will let you know about that.
All right, thank you very much. It is one of your bullet points there, and it would just be nice to see some of that action take place. So we're not just looking at positive balances in an account sheet, we're looking at something in the town centre that it transforms into. Thank you. And we look forward to further news of your progress. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a couple of questions about the medium-term financial forecast and to do with the inflationary projections. I just wonder what specific figure we use for the inflationary projections, where that comes from, and secondly, how frequently we update the model based on actual inflationary rates.
Okay. Overall, regarding inflation, the key areas we tend to look at are regarding pay. It's like obviously in terms of the council budget, it's one of our largest costs. So clearly we make assumptions regarding that, and actually regarding such energy costs, and where it, or if there are any contracts which are linked into any sort of inflationary increase. So what we take is a composite view of all those different areas. In terms of what assumptions we've actually got in there, in broad terms, for a lot of those costs, it's round about the 1.5% to 2% mark. There are lots of things where we don't allow inflation in the budget forecast. So again, there are certainly costs that we don't necessarily expect to just go up by inflation. We also assume an increase in some sort of income lines, for example, as well, where maybe fees and charges may go up as well. So it's broadly assumptions around the 1.5% to 2% mark. It's mostly regarding assumptions regarding pay, energy costs. Also, business rates is another cost that goes up by an inflation rate as well. We review them I suppose in a way, again, I'd make the point that they are actually assumptions to plan by, rather than saying this is what we expect it to be. So it's to have a position in there, so it's taken account of it. We will review that. So as part of setting the 16-17 budget, there will be detailed assumptions made regarding pay, regarding energy, regarding business rates, whatever, all the costs, and there'll be a lot more detail behind that. Because we'll have a bit more information. Because actually energy, for example, our energy prices, which we'll know some of our energy prices because they get purchased centrally. It's all part of a consortium, and so therefore we'll know the rate for about half the year, in September time, because it'll be fixed and we'll be told that, but we'll have to make a forecast for the other half of the year. So we review them really sort of as part of the budget setting process and then revise it in the medium-term financial forecast. So I hope that helps answer.
Happy with that, Councillor Pearson?
Yeah.
Good. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Page 62, town walls, £100,000 there. Could you expand on that for me, please? Is this in response to some kind of agreed set programme of repairs which are being rolled out? This is a response to that, or is this just money being transferred sideways to be held in the budget in response to a forthcoming programme? Or could you expand on that for me, please?
That's fine. I mean, partly as a result of actually reviewing, we had funding in place for various town wall schemes, which was in the capital programme that had been identified, and there was a review that was looking at actual future commitments that we have to make, and that was saying that we needed to be putting aside about £50,000 each year to establish a fund so that we could pick up these repairs. So this £100,000 starts that process off. And as part of future budgets, we will be identifying an extra £50,000 to put into that fund each year. So it's starting off that fund, if you like, and recognising we're also going to be putting extra money aside to actually provide for the upkeep and maintenance of the walls.
Fine. I applaud the expenditure being spent in that area. I just wondered if there was a priority list of various areas, because I have a particular area in mind from Bodmobog Hill up to the Arts Centre, where there are areas that really do need looking at fairly urgently, in my view. I'm not an expert on Roman walls, but visually it looks in need of some TLC. So I didn't know whether there was a programme already in place. If there isn't, I think there probably should be. Thank you.
Yeah. As I say, I'm not an expert in Roman walls either. I know that again there has been a review done in looking at the fact that we need to start providing it. I'm not too sure to the extent to which that's actually looked and said we need to do these repairs first. So again, I'll need to take that away and ask the relevant officer. And again, I can come back to the panel and answer that. But I'm sure that will be the case. They will be identifying where to do any repairs first off. But I haven't got that information to hand.
Thank you. I mean, if possible, Madam Chair, I'd be very happy to receive that over the email system. And I'm sure other people would be interested as well. But, not as a separate report back here, but just as something we could email the detail out. I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be useful for everyone to see that, I think. Thank you. Councillor Cope.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a question of the figures relating to the different grants we get from central government over time. There's reference in 417, which refers back, that 13%, I assume, comes from the bottom line of the table in 4.4. whose figures are greyed out. And there's another reference to a loss of government grant. I assume it's a loss because it's in brackets on the previous page, 11,612 under total government grant. Overall, I get very confused over this kind of small bits of information relating to the loss of this government grant here, loss of that government grant there. Would it be too much to ask for a single table sometime to tell us all the losses of government grants over time, not just 1 year compared with last year, because it might have gone up last year and might be only down compared with last year, but up compared with the year before. I feel that we're kind of drip-fed information on this relationship with central government. We get little bits and pieces about, we've lost a bit of money there and we've gained a bit of money there. I'm probably asking for too much all in one table, but over time it would be helpful to have a bigger picture of the loss of government grants.
I do believe there was something last year. There was, or when the grants came out for this year, there was a table with each different grant and whatever, and the new homes bonus and whatever. And it aggregated out actually quite well, almost in our favour. But there was the actual main government grant showed a big drop, but that was quite a useful table, I think, and it showed movement in all the grants.
So being more specific about what we've got here, in this, I appreciate if it's been done elsewhere, I'm perhaps asking for something to be done. In this little table 4.4, can then, therefore, kind of a local explanation of what's going on there. It's in grey and it's in brackets, so that's estimated, is it? And so can you talk us through just that little table then, for now?
Of course I will do. I suppose the first point is that actually they had no hidden meaning to figures being in grey. I think they were in red on the report, and it's just in red because there's an income figure. So all the brackets is just denoting actually income. So this is not looking at any change between years. This is commenting on the actual total level of government funding that we receive in our core funding. So it's excluding new homes bonus. So what it's saying is in 15-16, we're receiving £7.1 million, and that's a combination of a revenue support grant, so that's actual government grant that's paid, and then part of the business rates, which we're able to keep under the retention of business rate scheme. This report is a forward-looking document, so it's looking ahead to 16-17 and the medium-term financial forecast. So this is our current working assumptions. So it's basically saying that in total, we're expecting those to fall by 13%. And that is the same 13% as the 4.17 I mentioned there. I mean, in terms of the specific point, I provided some information as part of a members' training session the other week, and that has a table on it that actually looks at how that specific funding has changed and how new homes bonus has also changed over the time. I'm happy to share that round to all the members of the panel here. I say it was a series of slides, so I can share that round, or I can just pull out those key points. And again, I can do that. It's not a problem. Happy to email that round to the panel if they'd like it.
Thank you. I think that would be useful. Councillor Hardy.
To go back to the Roman walls again, do we know who the last contractors were that were employed, and do we know what the conditions of their contract was? Because the working patterns that the duo seem to use on doing that section between Crouch Street and St Mary's Church were a couple of hours in the morning, and then several weeks later they turned up and did a couple of hours in another part of the day. It seemed a very casual kind of contract.
Sorry, Councillor Howard, I don't feel that's the right place. We're actually doing the finances. I think we need to get into. I mean, it's something I think the Councillor Corey has said he's looking at is all the look of the town centre and everything, and I think that needs to come out in that, and maybe we need a separate report on the town walls. I think that would be a really useful thing, just to cover all those sort of questions. Would that help?
I think I hear your point. We'll take it back. We aren't in charge of all of these projects. It's the financial side of things, but we can take that back. We want to learn, obviously, and make sure we do it right. We've got this money that we're spending to improve the town centre. We want to ensure that we are doing it in the most efficient way and repairing our walls, which are a very good focal feature for bringing people in and looking at our heritage. So we will ensure that hopefully the contract is done right and in a proper way.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that, I think I would just like to ask that as part of our work programme, once Cabinet has considered and approved a programme of work for improvement of the town centre, that comes here for scrutiny. That will give us that opportunity.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that that would be quite a good piece of work for us to do. Thank you.
Can I just add, Chairman, that we will have throughout the year things coming on board. It may be useful after we've got a majority of those schemes coming forward that you have that all together. So it may be actually in about sort of eight months that you actually would see most of those projects coming forward.
But I actually think this is a good case for pre-scrutiny. We see very little here for pre-scrutiny. We tend to find out about it after the event. So maybe, if there's something that's coming up, you could actually ask us to look into it, and it's something that we could pre-scrutinise and let you have some feedback on it.
I will take that back to Cabinet and to the leadership team on Thursday.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Looking at bullet point 3 or 3.5, new assistance for those disadvantaged by changing economic circumstances. Could I have a quick selection of what sort of things we're talking about here?
Sorry, did you say 3.5 on 63?
3.5 on page 63, the third bullet point, new assistance. It seems rather vague. I'd be quite interested to know what exactly we're thinking about.
Again, at the moment it's vague because we have this surplus that we're looking into how we are spending it. So we are still making decisions on how we would carry out that spending, where we would put the money exactly. But I can say, and I did say I didn't want to get too political, but with the latest budget we've had, there are significant changes to welfare. There are welfare cuts that are going to seriously affect our residents. Now, we have been prudent. We've allocated for those risks in terms of the, for example, the benefits cap being reduced. We did a lot of work and we were praised for our work that we did over the last 2 years when the benefit cap was introduced. It's now been reduced further, and we have to ensure that that does not damage our society as a whole. I recently visited Colchester Equality, who have just launched, and there are statistics to show that if there is greater inequality in our society, that everyone loses out, rich and poor. So I think there are areas here that we're looking to ensure that those who are disadvantaged by the recent benefit changes are supported, but also we're supporting people with ideas about getting back into work, training and those side of things. So we are really enabling our residents in Colchester and not simply just sort of supporting all the time, but we are enabling them to achieve more.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. There's no more questions. We're being asked to consider and note the budget strategy, medium-term financial forecast and budget timetable, and refer any comments or concerns back to Cabinet. I'm not sure that we have had some comments that have come out of this, and I'm sure that they will be fed back. I look forward to receiving some responses on those. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sean. On to Treasury Management. Mr. Heath. Feels a bit like Mastermind. Mr. Heath, would you like to? It did, didn't it? Yeah, that's my new job. One thing I would say before we start here is if any members around the table wish to refer to the item, anything on page 95, any specifics on page 95, could they please indicate? Having said that, do we have any members of the public here? I.e. not councillors and not officers? No, we don't. So that's a waste of time saying that, really, then, wasn't it? Because we won't have to clear the room.
They'll still hear it on the audio, Madam Chair.
They will, that's very true. So we'll have to just turn the audio off. So if you could indicate if you will be talking about any of those specifics on that yellow page, if you could just indicate, please. Thank you. Mr. Heath.
Right, okay, good evening. So this report relates to the Council's investment and borrowing activity during the 2014-15 financial year. It's the first of 3 reports you'll receive in relation to Treasury management this year. So there's this one, which is the review of the previous year. In November, you'll see the mid-year review of the current year, and then in January, for pre-scrutiny, you'll see the strategy for the following financial year. So if there are any further significant events relating to Treasury management during the year, I'll report those to the panel as part of the quarterly capital monitoring reports. So just very quickly then, all the borrowing and investment activities are managed in-house, and all the activity during the year complied with the strategy that was approved by Council back in February 2014. So this strategy anticipated correctly that the interest rate would remain at 0.5% for the year, and in that environment our borrowing strategy was to continue to avoid any new borrowing, and it's been that way since the onset of the financial crisis. Our investment policy also continues to reflect a low appetite for risk. The average rate we earned on our investments during the year was 0.51%, so not a very large figure, but still ahead of the benchmark. As has already been said, there is the confidential appendix on page 95, which details the outstanding investments at the end of the financial year. Finally, just wanted to highlight that there was a favourable variance against the Council's loans and investment budget for 14-15, which is primarily due to higher than anticipated cash balances and the ongoing strategy of internal borrowing. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. When I was at the LGA conference recently, I attended a session specifically on Treasury management, and the former Chief Operating Officer of Deutsche Bank was there, and he was saying that one of the best places to put funds at the moment is in UK T-bonds and gilts, and I was wondering if that could form part of the not necessarily strategy, but if that could be something that could be considered in the upcoming years. He was also saying that the safest place to lend money, if you like, is other local authorities, and local authorities are a safer bet at the moment than banks. It's sort of it's a basically, are you going to consider all of the different options? Because the interest rate on T-bonds and gilts is 4 to 5%.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. We will shortly be having a meeting with our Treasury Management Advisor, and I will raise that point with him. The strategy since the onset of the financial crisis has been to keep investment short, and the underlying strategy is looking at the security of the investment first of all. Of course, these are secure, and then liquidity. So, you know, the majority of our investments have been in that very short-term time frame. But definitely, we'll look at this, and I can feed back to the panel either as part of the capital monitoring report or separately with his feedbacks. Regarding investment with other local authorities, we have placed investments with other local authorities over the past few years. These have been, again, relatively short-term, 3 or 4 months, when they've offered what we thought was a fair rate. And as they're part of the government, they are AAA rated. But obviously there were no such outstanding investments at the end of this financial year. But yes, that is something we've looked at. But because, yeah, again, it's very secure investment.
Thank you. Councillor.
You've made me curious now. You may not be able to answer this question, but looking at 3.4, we are where we are, but I should still like to know, if possible, where we as a local authority stand in relation to other local authorities of a similar size about long-term debt. We see what our long-term debt is there. How do we stack up? Is there a pecking order that we can refer to of long-term debt to other local authorities of a similar size?
Is that in terms of the value or the rate that we're... Sorry. Right.
The value, my apologies.
I'm sure that, I could obtain charts that would show that information for clients of our Treasury advisor. I imagine on the curve we would probably be somewhere in the middle. As you know, a lot of a lot of authorities had to take on significant additional debt to buy themselves out of the housing subsidy system. But again, I'm sure that data is available, and I could obtain that and share it with the panel.
Yeah, if it's, I don't want to go to too much trouble. It was just curiosity. That it'd be nice to know that where we sit within the framework of local authorities of a similar size. And as I say, we are where we are, and this debt goes back an awful long way, I'm sure. But it would be nice to know more or less where we are.
Thank you. Councillor Cope.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the table on page 92 and the comment above it in paragraph 8.1, investments, we're still being told how the bank rate is at a historic low. What analysis has been done in the event of risk analysis, if it should go up? What's the overall effect on our finances if the bank rate goes up? And I'm sorry to sound ignorant, but what does bank rate versus libid percentage mean?
Okay. Well, the bank rate is you know, that's the rate of interest that we hear about on the news, set by the Bank of England. The libid is slightly different, and that's the rate at which banks lend to each other. So in terms of the risk analysis, the Treasury strategy does show a forecast of increases in the bank rate over the coming 2 to 3 years. Again, it's not expected to start increasing at the moment until the middle of 2016, and then very gradually. And I think our strategy is very robust, particularly the strategy of internal borrowing, because the bank rate and the rates that are available for local authority investments would need to increase significantly for there not to be a cost of carry for any new borrowing. So I think that the current borrowing strategy is robust in view of a gradually increasing interest rate environment.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Pearson? Do I need to read the bit? I move that in accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972 and the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements Access to Information England Regulations 2000, the public, including members of the press, be excluded from the meeting for the remainder of this item, as a discussion will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. More questions on the Treasury Management item? Are we all happy with that? We've been asked to consider and note the performance, which we have done. I think we've given you a little bit of food for thought there and given some things to consider. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Corey. You can pop up there. And thank you, Mr. Plummer, as well. Okay, back to item 12, review of Colchester Borough Homes Performance 2014-15, and apologies for the delay in this item. So as I say, Councillor Corey had a pressing engagement there, so please feel free to come to the table. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Very much appreciated. I'm assuming, would you like to do your presentation first, or would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say a few words. Thank you, Chair. This is the annual scrutiny of Colchester Borough Homes. Their performance data, which panel are used to scrutinising on an annual basis. We have something different for you as well today, as well as the performance summary information to scrutinise, the progress report on new housing arrangements. Panel will already recall that 4 councillors, Colchester Borough Council councillors, are on the board of Colchester Borough Homes. Board meetings are made in meet in public, and this evening I'm delighted to introduce Anne Grahamslaw to the panel. Anne is the chair of Colchester Borough Homes, and this is her first scrutiny panel meeting, along with Greg Falvey, chief executive, who you've met on many occasions before, and Greg has prepared a presentation taking the panel through the key impacts of the implementation of the new housing arrangements, which was negotiated by a management agreement in August 2013. All 3 of us are available to answer your questions afterwards or provide more information, Chair, which I'm sure you'll remember. And I'd like to pass over to Greg for his presentation.
Lovely, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having us in front of your panel. Much appreciated. In previous years, what we've done is we've poured over key performance indicators with a few slides to add a bit of narrative around that. As Tina was alluding to, what we're going to do is something slightly different. So in your packs, you've got, on your agenda papers, you've got tables showing key performance indicators. Perhaps we can come to the detail of those at question time. But for now, I was going to go through the earlier paper in the pack, the one that's called the 1 year on implementation of new CBC CBH management agreement, because we have gone through something of a series of changes over the last couple of years, which are quite important, certainly for us. So we thought it would be more helpful for you to have a tiptoe through that. if that's okay. So just by, I mean, a number of you would have been involved, of course, in the local housing review project, but just by way of a reminder, the ALMO, Colchester Borough Homes, was set up in 2003. It had a 5-year management agreement. It then renewed that and had another 5-year management agreement. So it was then time to set up a review to look at the future of the housing service, the whole housing service. And the decision was made after this large project that started in 2011. The decision was made to have a new management agreement, and that was signed August 2013. And the new housing arrangements project actually completed 2014 because the decision was made not just to renew the management agreement, but to have a migration of services, some from CBH into the borough and some from the borough into CBH. And outside of the project, but at the same time, the decision was made as well to transfer responsibility for corporate facilities management from, there's an error on the slide, I'm sorry, from CBC to CBH. So as you know, we look after the management of the council's housing stock, and as a consequence of this, these projects, we now also look after the public buildings, about 105 of the council's non-housing buildings. The main changes, other than the ones I've just highlighted, the project also saw the transfer of, as you know, the bulk of our housing work is funded from the housing revenue account, so from rents, and the rest of the local authority's income is from the general fund, from the council taxpayer. And historically, at Colchester Borough Homes, we've only ever looked at HRA-funded work, housing work. But what this new management agreement has done is it signalled a bit of a change there. So we've taken on some general funded work. So we've taken on the housing options team, the corporate facilities management that I've just mentioned. And the housing option team also includes the homelessness function, which is funded from the general fund. At the same time, we transferred what we call our customer services team into the council's customer services environment. So that's principally our call handling. We also took the opportunity to review our articles of association and our board. We recruited a new chair. We reduced our board from 12 to 15 to make it a bit leaner, and we've took the opportunity to revise our committee structure at the same time. Quite significant for us as well is that under the old agreement, we used to receive a management fee, which paid for the bulk of our salaries and paid for our housing management work. We then spent the council's maintenance budget on maintenance by through what was called a delegated budget. But in these new arrangements, that delegated budget, it made more sense to put that inside the management agreement. So the management agreement now includes that maintenance budget. I mentioned that because it's quite an important change for us. And the new agreement also put in place the groundwork for Colchester Borough Homes to commence what we call a trading activity. So it's beginning to sell our services to third parties. Sorry, I wanted to say at the beginning as well that this report was a joint report between Gareth's team and our team with the portfolio holders' seal of approval. Because we thought it was important. It was a joint project that led to these key decisions, and we wanted to reflect back across the whole service. So it's a joint report. Other highlights from the year: the local authority asked us to save 60,000 on a management fee, which we've done. When we took over the corporate facilities management service, we were able to make a £50,000 saving on the general fund at the point of transfer. Now that we've got that team working alongside our asset management team and our direct labour organisation, it's given us a sort of a mass of skills that we can make good use of. And what we're finding is the local authority is asking us to do an amount of technical work that it might in the past otherwise have engaged consultants to do. And that's also bringing on a stream of efficiency savings as well for the local authority. And because the public buildings management is with us. We're now able to tap into our supply chain that we were using for maintaining our own council homes. And that supply chain is bringing up efficiencies as well. And looking at the area of homelessness, we're quite focused. It's very difficult, but we're quite focused on the want to reduce the use of bed and breakfast and the use of out-of-town bed and breakfast. We haven't cracked it yet. We think this is going to be year one of a 3-year journey, but we're well on the way. And that saves us money. And what we're doing with that money, in agreement with the borough, of course, is we're putting that into procuring some alternative temporary accommodation that's of a much better standard, with better levels of support in place. So it's a much better product. So one, it's saving us money, but two, it's a better product for homeless people. Through our early endeavours on external trading to third parties, we've also made a significant contribution to our overheads, and we've also, in addition to that, made approximately 100,000 in profit that we've ploughed back into the services. I mentioned just now that the repairs budget now forms part of our management fee, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say we spent within budget, so you should take a comfort from that. It's the first year you've given it to us as part of our fee, and just to report back that we spent it well and within budget. I think very much a hallmark of the year as well has been a closer strategic alignment between CBC and CBH, particularly around partnership working. We've got very good now, haven't we, Tina, liaison arrangements in place. Anne meets Tina and meets separately with Adrian. I have regular meetings with Adrian. And Galva's team and my team meet on a regular basis through what's called the liaison meeting. And so business is done not in dark corridors, but at proper, specified meetings with good minutes and good open channels of communication. We've had much greater involvement in planning and delivery of the council's housing objectives. So, for example, we worked alongside borough colleagues on the HRA business plan and in supporting the council's new build programme that you'll be aware of. And with the public buildings, we've also started now a whole series of stock condition surveys of all the public buildings in ownership, so we can come up with some long-term planning on the investment requirements for those properties, which ranges from the town hall, the leisure centre, public toilets, a couple of churches, all sorts of buildings that are in the ownership of the council. A few other highlights. The customer services team that transferred over to the borough, that had a difficult start. That was very much a matter that Gareth and I worked through. And I have to say, because it was a time of change for that team. But I'm happy to say that the CBH team and the council team worked very hard, and you'll see in the stats later on that that's settled down now and is very much stabilised and is in a good place. We've had something, I would say, slow progress on IT updates. It's you want to move quicker than your IT can assist you. There's much more we wanted to do around agile working, etc. That we've been slightly, not just CBC, CBH, but CBC as well, slightly frustrated by it. It never seems to kind of move fast enough. And that last point, just wanted to highlight that, it hasn't all been rosy. But I know when we took over the public buildings, we were midway on refurbishing some toilets in Rona House, and that project didn't go as well as it should, so some lessons learnt there. It was an interesting experience for us. Of course, we had 200 or 300 council colleagues acting as clerks of work on that particular project, so we're grateful for their input. Also worked very well together. I think it's fair to say, we've enjoyed writing this report, because upon reflecting on the last year, it is becoming demonstrable here that when we work together, we work very well indeed. And here are some other projects that we've worked together on: the housing strategy, homelessness strategy, the asset management strategy for the stock, housing development strategy, and our community and enabling strategy. a lot of strands of work that have been done collaboratively. And we've also been asked to, as you know, we've helped with the refurbishment of the shelter schemes, the first being Worsnop House. I hope you've all had a chance to visit that. If you haven't, do, because it's really worth a visit. It's a good piece of work. And there'll be other finances permitting that other shelter schemes that will go through a similar refurbishment. And CBH is going to be engaged as well to assist on the St Bottles Creative Business Centre. We've got a number of internal projects underway, and we'll share those findings with the Borough at the right moment. One thing we're working on is a value for money strategy. And we've shown an early draft to Gareth's team that they're helping us make some alterations to it to make it a bit fitter for them. We're carrying out what's called a future-proofing project. So we've got our new management agreement. There are a lot of challenges facing housing over the next sort of 5-10 years, and we just want to make sure that as an organisation we're as resilient as we can be to cope with those challenges. And we're looking forward to doing further work on expanding our commercial opportunities. So in terms of the key performance data, I think I'll just leave that for questions, but you know, normally on these evenings we skip the green and highlight the red. But can I just throw can I throw in a couple of greens before we start? It's just to say that the rent arrears figure we're particularly pleased with. That's a green. We're particularly pleased because of the economic climate that we've had over the last 18 months, 2 years. It's been particularly difficult. But I think that Karen was telling me we've got the best rent arrears collection rates in East Anglia. So we should be pleased with that. And a reminder, I can remember coming to Scrutiny 4 or 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, when our voids figure was average 54 days, and you'll see it's now down to 17. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity of focusing on a couple of greens. But is it all right, Chair, if we go to the reds in the pack? Let's find them in the pack. Oh, thank you. Page 46, number of households in temporary accommodation. We set ourselves, I mean, every year that I've been at Colchester, we've made the targets each year tougher and tougher and tougher. The targets have never stayed the same. They've always got tougher, and thankfully we've always followed the right trajectory on them. The temporary accommodation target that we agreed with the Borough was a tough one. As you can see, we nearly got there, but it is red. But what I would say, though, just to re-emphasise, is that whilst it's our desire always to have less reliance on temporary accommodation, I do just want to make the point that of the temporary accommodation that we've got, some of it is family mosaic, which is a very high standard. We've now got less of our own council temporary accommodation, because some of it has been disposed of. And of the stock that's remaining, that's all received attention in the last 12, 18 months in terms of bringing it up to a good standard. And we're also using alternative providers as well, where we're leasing properties and other agencies are providing support. So although we haven't hit our target, I did just want to emphasise that of the temporary accommodation we are using, regrettably, it is of a much better standard. The next red is on page 48, which is percentage under-occupied council homes. Again, we set ourselves a tough target. Since the welfare, the bedroom subsidy was introduced, or rather the removal of what was called the bedroom subsidy was removed, we've managed to downsize or encourage, work with residents to downsize 80 families, or 80 homes down to smaller accommodation. And working alongside the Housing Benefit Department and other colleagues within the Borough have done a huge amount of work at targeting people who have been facing the overall benefits cap. So a huge amount of work around the welfare reform agenda. We did have a tough target. We haven't hit it, but we do still have lots of initiatives in place, mutual exchange days, and we have with the agreement with the Borough, we've upped what's called the Tenants Incentive Scheme to make it more attractive for people to move. So we've got a number of things in place. Again, compared to other local authorities in the area, actually we're doing quite well. but we shouldn't rest at that. We should keep this as a tough target. Bottom of page 48, tenancy audits. We agreed with the Borough about a year ago that we would introduce a new initiative, which is to temporarily fund for 3 years 2 officers to conduct tenancy visits and tenancy audit visits across our entire stock. That's proved to be very fruitful indeed and eye-opening. It's throwing up a couple of things. One, it's helping us identify people who have vulnerabilities and who aren't contacting us. I mean, people contact us if they have vulnerabilities and we can help them, but there's quite a lot of hidden vulnerability out there. So it's been good for identifying those sorts of issues. We've also uncovered as well some pretty difficult property conditions that hadn't otherwise come to our attention, where people might have made sort of wacky home improvements or whatever. So we've been able to go in and sort that sort of work out. The reason why it's red is we set it up as a 3-year programme, and we underestimated how long it would take us to set up the programme and the IT and recruit the officers. But actually, the speed at which they're progressing, and we keep Tina and council colleagues up to date on this, the speed at which the team are progressing, we will hit our 3-year target. So although we started a few months late, we'll still hit the target at the end of year 3. I'm just thinking it's a danger I sound like the BBC now. I don't know if you listen to that programme of voice. There's a sort of a feedback programme on Radio 4, and they always get on the BBC spokesman to explain, and they always have a very good explanation as to why things aren't working. But obviously on all these targets, although they're red and I'm giving you sort of mitigations, it is disappointing, and we would like them to have been green. And as I say, we've agreed targets for next year, and they are tougher again. So. Oh, there are further reds, sorry. There's 52, average call waiting time. I mentioned earlier that this now sits with the Borough. Our target with them is 25 seconds. As you can see, they had in the early months of the year, it was a difficult time, but things are really sorted now and very good, and it is only a second off. And of course, the competitions is a greater competition field now as well, isn't there? Because it's all of the borough's calls, not just our sort of housing calls. But we've agreed to keep that target there and to keep chasing that target. Top of 53, that's both a green and a red. It's green in terms of our own in-house target. It's actually the local authority that collect the former tenant arrears. It's very confusing, but the work's delegated to us, and we recruit the council's finance officers to do the former tenant arrears chasing. But compared to other authorities, it's red, and an awful lot of that is to do with the management of write-offs and things. It's not a hugely helpful measure of that team's performance. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a really comprehensive run-through there. I have a question that may be relevant, it may not, but going back to something that was picked up in one of the earlier items, would there be any merit in CBH looking after the disabled facilities grant, as if Swan Housing are not doing it very well? Councillor Braun.
We already picked up as Gareth said earlier, we already picked up that we were not happy with the Swan handling of the programme, and we were having complaints as well from those people where the adaptations are supposed to support. We're running it through Colchester Borough Council's environmental health officers, because we are using the Disabled Facilities Grant programme to help with wider housing and health determinants. So we are picking them up within the council and using the property services arm of Colchester Borough Homes to deliver those adaptations. So there is a bit of both, isn't there? There's some admin from our side and commissioning of works, and then there's the delivery of works through Colchester Borough Homes. We have an interim arrangement at the moment, and then we need to set up a substantial arrangement once we have worked our way through the backlog of cases that came about because of the withdrawal from Swan. But yes, that is the kind of work that our partners, CBH, are well able to assist on and have the expertise to do the complex and the more simple DFG cases.
Thank you. I guess the only thing we have to watch is that we are getting the best value for money, which I'm sure we would be, but we do just need to be reassured that it is the best way of doing it. I mean, it seems to make sense, but as long as it's financially prudent as well. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A very good report. Congratulations to all concerned. The migration of services in each direction rather reminded me of the the Pakistan-Indian partition, when people went one way and people went the other way, and it was a bit of a muddle to start with, but it eventually settled down. But that was just my obscure thinking. Thank you. I'm very interested in tenancy audits completed. I was discussing this problem with Pam Donnelly before the meeting about specific problems in my area, in St Anne's, and I'm just wondering the availability of a breakdown ward by ward of what has been completed and where the concerns and problems are, because I certainly have concerns and problems. Having done a ward walkabout on Monday, which raised several issues, one of which I discussed with Pam Donnelly, where areas of concern over not just the holistic picture of a particular property, everything, condition of the property, condition of the garden, internal construction and so on, and as well as the welfare of children and the whole package. So I'd be very interested on the availability of a ward-by-ward breakdown into what you have found in carrying out this audit.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not quite sure what I can promise. I can promise I'll get back to you with whatever we've got, and if it isn't sort of ward by ward or nicely presented, we can do that. I'm not sure how much. I'm not sure to what sort of detail we can go to, because I know some reporting's been done already based on costings and number of case referrals. Whether that would help you in terms of sort of streets, if you like, I don't know, but I can certainly find out, and we'll rearrange it as necessary to try and help.
I think, Chair, if councillors have particular queries about properties in their ward, there is no problem at all with contacting Councillor Inquiries line and saying, and CBH could programme in the tenant audits to make a visit. But it is a supportive process, and a number of issues have been picked up from tenancy audits which have enabled tenants to move on to further support, and also identified for us from a landlord point of view as Colchester Borough Council that our stock condition needs to be as good as it possibly can be, because that helps our renewals budget, and it obviously helps the tenants, and it stops when the property becomes vacant, it stops the void time being longer if we can identify if there have been any alterations to that property that shouldn't have taken place without the knowledge of the landlord. So there is lots of information over the whole of the borough. Whether it would become, obviously we don't want it to become tenant specific, because some areas have very few council houses that are managed by Colchester Borough homes, and it might become obvious which properties they were in a ward by ward basis. But certainly if you have any queries about property, then please pass those through to CBH.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I mean, and I'm well aware that there are sensitivities, and the 3 properties that I had in mind in one particular area all have very sensitive issues with regard to health, well-being, and not just property condition, but the family aspect within those properties and sometimes without the properties. So I understand the sensitivities, and I'm coming at this in hopefully in a helpful way, not in any way in a condemning way, but in a helpful way, trying to work together with street services, the housing officers, the ward councillors, how best to tackle these various issues, and to help the individuals improve everything about their lives. Then that improves the immediate community and the wider community as we move forward. But I'm sure you'll appreciate, as a councillor with also large swathes of property in your ward, that there are concerns around specific families and specific properties and the way in which some families live, and some are not susceptible to sensitive approaches.
Councillor Harrington.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Greg, for your presentation. It's in the nature of scrutiny, of course, that we do go straight to the red, so you've boldly dealt with those and answered some of the questions that would have been fired at you. And for the sake of the recording, I'm sure you meant to say that the board has been reduced from 15 to 12 and not the other way round, which is a verbal typo. Not at all. Sorry to mention that. On your issues, you mentioned that you had a staffing problem at the beginning, and I believe a number of staff left because of this two-way migration. Is that right? And if so, I was wondering why and what lessons had been learnt from that.
I think you might be picking up some wording from within the report. Is it from within the detailed report that you picked that point up from? Can you remember?
I'm sure if it appears in the introduction, it's in the detailed report itself.
Because I think it refers to the customer services centre. So
it's actually top of page 34, unexpected level of staff turnover, first paragraph of page 34. It's summarised in your issues section, first bullet point of page 32. I just picked up on that. Had a high level of staff turnover.
Yes, that relates to the customer services team, which is a...
Why do you think you had a high level of turnover?
Well, as I say, that...
So I think Pam would like to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. The customer services team, Councillor Harrington, lies with the Borough Council, and it's an area that I have some responsibility for. We took the opportunity during the course of the construction of the management review to do a restructure to make sure that we were making full opportunity of the efficiency opportunities in front of us brought about by bringing the two service areas together. As a result of that, and identifying new roles with slightly different skill mixes, clearly there was a competitive process, and some people were unfortunate in not securing one of the roles.
Okay.
So although I don't particularly like the term natural wastage, there was a natural and competitive process that resulted in some members of staff leaving the council in the same way as occurs with any structure or restructure of our services.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Just looking at issues as well, perhaps this is one for Councillor Bourne. The ICT that was available to you during this merging obviously caused you some problems. It's referred to as causing a struggle. Do you think that was a one-off ICT issue, or does it reflect bigger problems across the council that need to be addressed in the quality of ICT available?
Thank you. Chair, ICT is something I think that bugs local authorities at scrutiny panels and other meetings quite often. It's quite surprising how many different systems there are within local authority service areas, and housing Revs and Bens used to operate a different. It makes it very difficult to share data. So as we try to migrate and get our systems to be compatible and talk to each other, and also for them to talk to Department of Work and Pensions as well, and get that kind of seamless work going through, especially with the introduction of universal credit and the other welfare reforms. You have to take a decision whether you upgrade everything to the same system or you look at where you get your best value, because any ICT project is vast sums of money. It's not just about changing a bit of kit, it's whole servers and everything. And then when CBH moved into, we had a much better partnership with the way we were working as well. We also had their systems as well that organisation have been using as well, and their property services are using a different system to the housing management service. So I think this is something that we can't solve overnight, and we can't even solve over 2 years. We have to make the best with some workarounds of some of our systems to try and get them to be compatible, and some just aren't, and they are never going to be. And that's because they were set up at different times with totally different structures. So we have the best that we can get at the moment until we move to a new system. I'm not an IT expert, but I do suffer with the frustration of workarounds, because you always want IT to you always say, why can't I get that report off? Why can't I do that? Well, you can't. And then when you're trying to match some of the data, some of our electoral data with some of our other tenancy management data, the two don't work. So sometimes we've even had to go through the archaic process of manually looking at the two, especially when we had the welfare reforms coming in, because we wanted to make sure that none of those tenants and none of the residents fell through a hole, that we captured every single resident that was going to be affected, and we got to them proactively as soon as possible. So there was a good deal of manual looking at the data.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I have one or two more? Just an observation here. I think it's good work that has been done, obviously, to help 80 families downsize for whatever reason, because that's released 80 homes to families whose family needs are now better met. So I think that's very useful. The 25 seconds or 26 to answer the phone, is that actually until a human being talks to you, having made the call?
Yes, I understand it's a sensible measure. It is when a human answers the phone.
There are many organisations with much longer waiting times than that, so I find that not bad at all. And just one final point, if I may. The gas certificates, isn't it a legal requirement that every home with a gas supply has an annual certificate? So can it only be the case that you have 100% of those homes with a gas certificate?
That's correct. It's still obviously very, very useful to track it and measure it, and it is one that we feel that we should, always be very public about. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, well, congratulations on all the green flags. There's one table I really don't understand. Can you talk me through it? It's the top one on page 50, non-decent homes. It looks to me as if in 11-12 there were none. 12-13 there were none. 13-14 there were none. And suddenly 9.5% of our homes were non-decent. And then you work down to naught again. How does that happen in real life?
Thank you, I think. The Decent Home Standard is a technical standard laid down by government, and it talks about the age. It's about the general condition of the property, but it's also about the age of some of the components within the property, the boiler, the kitchen, and the bathroom and the wiring. all sorts of elements, but they're the key ones. And over the years, we've been pursuing what we call the decent home standard, and we got to the stage a couple of years ago where we achieved absolute 100% decency standard. But of course, as each year goes by, so if within the decent home standard it says, you know, your average life expectancy of a boiler is 25 years, or your average life expectancy of a kitchen is 30 years, don't quote me on these figures because I might have got them wrong. You know, as each year goes by, a couple of hundred properties are going to fall into the non-decent category. So if your boiler reaches its expected lifetime date, it technically becomes non-decent. So the way in which we design the investment programs with the borough is to make sure as best we can at the end of each year we achieve 100% decency, or certainly by the end of the 5-year investment program. So we've got, with the borough, a housing revenue account business plan that takes a 30-year view. And there are estimates around costings of all of the elements that you know, when does a property need a new wiring, when does it need a new roof, all those are sort of look at an indicative plan, but it gets much more detailed over a 5-year view. So every year we come to cabinet with borough colleagues and revise the 5-year plan so that it moves on 1 year. So it's always a 5-year plan, and it's our hope that at the end of each of those 5-year periods that we'll always hit 0. So as I say, we've got 7,000 units, so or 6,300 tenancies. So each year, a good couple of hundred of them will become non-decent, and we plan our work as best we can to make sure we capture them before they become non-decent. We could, in theory, do them all because we can anticipate when they can become non-decent, but sometimes it's worth packaging up contracts. You know, so it might be better to let a contract for 50 units than for, or it might be better to do it for 100 than for 50, if you get my point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see individual units become obsolete and then they have to be replaced as time goes on. Okay. Can I come back on another question, Madam Chair? Again, on this staff transfer, others have noticed this, and at the end of the various staff transfers, there's 200 staff with CBH. What criteria were applied as to whether a given function should be performed by CBC or CBH? How many staff still working in CBC are doing jobs which are related to CBH? I'll put it sort of broadly like that. I could also say, I could rephrase it by saying that could be done by CBH. Because it seems to me that it seems a bit arbitrary. You move some this way, some that way, as Councillor Hogg pointed out, like the traffic going over the bridge. So what were the criteria and what are we left with?
It's a very interesting question. We, before the new housing arrangements, we did a scoping exercise on the different areas that were being provided around the whole housing. So that's property, housing strategy, housing management, homelessness, all of the duties of a housing team that a local authority had to provide, and even some of the optional stuff that was being provided. It was quite a long list. I think there were 35, between 35 and 40 different areas that were being provided by both organisations, and we went through as 2 organisations and took a view on which ones would be best parcelled up, actually, because there was some those elements of not duplication, but would be better able to service those tenants through using one organisation rather than handing over from one to the other. And obviously Colchester Borough Council kept all the strategic housing parts, and some of the more delivered direct to the tenants services were then moved over to Colchester Borough Homes, and that piece of work was done probably two years ago now, I think. It was just the end of the local housing review and before the new housing arrangements. So, and that formed part of the management agreement and also helped us with the liaison protocol over who is going to make a decision, where is this decision going to be taken, and who is going to monitor that decision and the outcome of that. And under the old management agreement, that wasn't very tight. And it is a lot tighter now. So I think of all our areas in the council that we monitor the most, Colchester Borough Homes probably has the most scrutiny in different forms across the council, whether it's formal and informal kind of scrutiny on a monthly basis. So all of that had to, in order to draw up the management agreement, we had to think about who is going to take on which of those service areas. So we took the view that strategy would stay within the auspices of the council, and then the delivered services direct to the tenants in the main would go to Colchester Borough Homes.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. This is probably a pedestrian question, but I've not asked it before. Do council houses pay for themselves? In other words, do they wash their face, or are they subsidised from other, say, general fund and elsewhere? I'm just interested whether rents do in fact cover the costs. Thank you.
Unfortunately, as ever, there are sort of 2 or 3 answers to this. If you look at historical debt, if you look at the history of social housing, of council housing, you know, in the 40s and 50s, when they were commissioned and procured, it was done through public spending. And some of those debts are still what they call an overhanging debt. Some of those debts are still overhanging in Colchester. But certainly in terms of cost of build and payback, there is no general fund money, council taxpayers' money, goes toward council housing. All housing rental income, whether it be benefited or paid direct by the resident, more than covers the cost of renting and maintaining that property. In fact, it makes a small surplus, which is used by the borough to do a bit of remodelling and a bit of refurbishment and make a contribution towards, together with some additional borrowing towards new build. And it really matters to people who work in the movement that the public understand that, because quite often social housing is portrayed as being, you know, subsidised housing. Actually, it's not in the main. I can think of lots of examples of particular areas that are, but not social housing in the main.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hardy.
Good evening. Can I take you back to page 31? There is the 4th bullet point there. Additional procurement savings are made possible by the integration of whatever, using the existing CBH supply chain. And the last one, the repairs budget is now part of CBH management fee and is therefore of note that this new programme is managed within budget. Have any measures been put in place to ensure that newly refurbished items are not removed from properties and resited elsewhere?
Illegitimately, do you mean?
Yes, I do mean illegitimately, if it's done right in front of the eyes of the people whose job it is to check the work's been done, which has actually happened. I'm interested in knowing if anything has been done to make sure this doesn't happen. For example, a team popping by 6 months later, a year later, 18 months later, to see that in the particular case I'm talking about, it's refurbished kitchens, to see that they are still in place and not replaced with substandard stuff.
Thank you. We do. We have a rolling programme of stock condition surveys. We do about 10% of the stock every year, where it's not just an inspection from a housing officer, but from a technical officer. but that's mainly when properties are empty. We also have visits from our housing officers, but to be honest, if someone's maintaining their tenancy well, they're less inclined to get a visit from a housing officer, and that's why we've introduced the team we mentioned earlier that are doing all properties over a 3-year period, who can go back and check on things like that. So in answer to your question, we don't routinely go back because we do refurbishments and repairs to all of the stock, and it wouldn't be cost effective to go back to all of them. But certainly in any 1 year, we probably visit a third of our stock, either by a housing officer, a tenancy audit officer, or a surveyor.
What would be the measures that you would put in place if you went into a firm, not you personally, of course, but the organisation will put in place if they discover that the units that were all paid for and brand new and whatever, of whatever colour that had been put in, let's say 3 years ago, are no longer there, and that something else of a substandard quality has been put in instead? Is there anything that you would do?
If it's in any way malicious, or if something expensive was removed, we can recharge. But residents do have the right to improve, and it's a matter of judgment whether they're an improvement's an improvement. But they certainly have the right to make extensive improvements. But they do need to seek permission first, and part of the permission granting process is about getting in the right products and a bona fide fitter. So in theory, if a tenant wants to dispose of one kitchen and replace it with their own, they need to seek permission, and they need to do that in a workmanlike manner, with the right products and the right fitters. If the damage is if the properties are damaged in such a way that we're not satisfied as custodians of your stock, then we will make a recharge.
Thank you. I've got another question, if I may. Could I turn you to page 38 and 39? I'm a new councillor, and I have been in this this activity for 2 months, and I've met Colchester Borough Housing on 3 occasions in that 2 months. I don't mean to be rude, but I am somewhat surprised at the self-congratulatory nature of this report. I hadn't expected that sort of thing. Could you please, if we have a look at page 38, it says here the team has so far delivered excellent results. I'd like to know what they are. This is to do with the challenges of universal credit. And on the following page, it says these strengthened arrangements have so far been highly successful in supporting a strong, based on whatever, this no surprises approach. How do you know that?
Thank you. I'm surprised you're surprised. The the point on universal credit, it was a really big deal for a lot of our residents, in that they were facing a benefit cap as well as a reduction in benefits in relation to the bedroom subsidy, as well as other not so well publicised reductions in benefits, as well as cuts to council tax support. And a number of things were conspiring in a lot of people's lives, and the people that live in our stock, to make their lives very difficult. And we worked very closely with the council's housing benefit department and other officers at the borough, and with the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, and with their own officers, and came up with a welfare reform strategy and a whole programme of work that didn't just sort of do that thing of saying, oh, if you're in difficulties, come and see us. But we did proactive door knocking to reach all of those families and have meaningful interventions with them. And you're right, but organisations shouldn't sort of rest on their laurels and be self-congratulatory, but we are pleased that we were mentioned jointly, the efforts of the DWP, the Borough's Housing Benefit Department, and our own team by the National Citizens Advice Bureau as exemplary in our approach to this. On page 39, the strengthened arrangements have so far been highly successful in supporting a strong working relationship based on a no surprises approach. That is a bit gooey, the wording. I'd agree with you there, Councillor. I think what we're trying to do there in the wording is to say we've entered into a pact with the borough of no surprises. It sounds a bit obvious, but when we're hugely allied. Of course, we have a parent organisation, the council, and we're the child organisation in the sense where we're the subsidiary. And it is possible sometimes to lose your way, but what we've done is we've entered into something of a pact, and we've said, no surprises. And the reason why we put it in there is because it's worked. And what we found, and Councillor Bourne referred earlier to the tight liaison arrangements we've got now, what we found is that as issues arise, the nature of those liaison arrangements is that they immediately come to the table. They immediately get debated with people like Gareth in the room and others, other colleagues, and they get dealt with. And yes, I think you're right, Councillor. The wording is a little bit gooey, because what we're trying to do there is do a bit of celebration and say, look, actually the relationship is strong, and I don't particularly want to be shy about celebrating a bit. So yeah, hands up. It's a bit the wording's a bit gooey there, but you get the point, I think.
Madam Chairman, I've got one last question, if I may. If we go back to page 32, if you look at the last lot of bullet points, the second one says joint work to progress a number of projects, including improving customer service, sheltered housing review, and the Creative Business Centre. Could you please explain how the Creative Business Centre is relevant to CBH, which surely is a housing organisation?
Thank you.
Largely funded by public money, so I don't understand. How are you involved in this Creative Business Centre?
Thank you. Our core business, and very much the bulk of the activity of Colchester Borough Homes, is around council housing. But the borough has also given us the role of managing some non-housing public buildings. So they're in the ownership of the council, but they're not houses. Because we've got a property services department that has a fair amount of skills and expertise within it, that bit of Colchester Borough Homes has been engaged to help in the construction project management of the Creative Business Centre. So they'll be helping with the letting of the contracts and managing the contracts and specifying the works and general construction project management, which is very much a core skill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to add that the new management agreement gave us the chance to increase flexibilities and freedoms for our arm's length management organisation dealing with housing, who before, as Greg has ably said, was just dealing with our housing. What the government asked local authorities to do is go away, innovate, find some ordinary everyday business that you're doing and look at providing that in a commercial setting. And that is one thing that opportunity came forward for the Creative Hub, and that is exactly what Colchester Borough Homes is doing now. They weren't able to do that before under the previous management agreement. And in fact, the whole of this report never had to come here, never had to be written. Normally, we just look at the data and congratulate ourselves or not congratulate ourselves, depending on the RAG rating. But I was very keen that members, possibly who are not on the Colchester Borough Homes board or hadn't been through this process, which was started in 2011, weren't aware of the tremendous amount of work and energy that went into getting to where we are now. So it appeared to be a very good idea at the time to write this implementation report, which would bring those two organisations together to reflect on the last 4 years, because it has been an extremely long journey and sometimes has forked off into avenues that we hadn't anticipated. But one of the things about the strengthened arrangements is the forward-looking nature of both organisations now being better able to deal with financial difficulties that arise due to economics. So, for example, this is forever etched on my memory, the 8th of April 2013 was when the the bulk of welfare reforms was set into train. And at that time, the borough had 1,043 families affected by the under-occupation charge. There are now 400. And those 400 families will be supported through discretionary housing payments or have decided to pay the additional charge on top of that. So none of that would have been possible without some very creative working between two teams that previously really weren't working together. And that's our revenues and benefits team, providing council tax and housing benefit, not so much advice, but bills, which has manoeuvred into a much more customer focus and understanding what that looks like to the tenant or the resident facing a pressure on council tax or rent payments. And that has benefited both organisations to understand how the resident or tenant needs to deal with that. And out of those conversations came the renewed look at things like the financial inclusion officers that Colchester Borough Homes have implemented, which has been of huge benefit, because that financial inclusion officer is able to go out and visit tenants' homes, and even Colchester Borough Council staff now, the benefit teams, go out into residents' homes. They never did that before. So that kind of partnership working, learning a bit from both organisations, is really, that's the strengthened approach, as well as the scrutiny of some of the aspects of the liaison protocol. There's also that strengthened arrangement, which is delivering benefits for the tenants and residents.
Thank you. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was just going to comment on, in support of what Councillor Bourne was saying about ICT and the problems. Having worked for 30 years in the IT industry, as a consultant, as a programmer, done just about every job, I look at things from a supplier's point of view, and I can probably enlighten the panel on why these things arise, if the panel will indulge me for a couple of minutes, and why it's so difficult. That's in your gift. I will try and be quick. Thank you. It's really down to human nature. When a client approaches a supplier with a requirement, the salesman will always say yes. Doesn't matter what it is, the salesman will say yes. He will then pass it on to a systems analyst who will then try and find out what it is that the customer wants. And it's at that point that the systems analyst starts to realise that what the customer actually wants isn't quite possible. And that's where things start to extend and get more and more complicated. In the meantime, someone like Microsoft, who supply the base system, will change something fairly radical halfway through the process so that things that worked before didn't work. And so, very simply, that's the kind of scenario that you're working with ICT. It changes every 6 months. So you start a project, and 6 months later, what you started with doesn't always necessarily work, which is why it goes on, and why there are problems.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an illuminating evening. I hadn't appreciated, and this leads me to my first question, that your organisation is in fact managing the whole of the Borough Council's estates portfolio. And the question really is, do we have a directory of what that portfolio is? Is it available for all of us, or is it available publicly even?
I would just emphasise that the council still retains an estates department. So concerns around land holdings and land strategy and valuations is very much still, that big strategic part is still with the borough. It's just a sort of the day-to-day management and planning of those, not the activities within the buildings, but the fabric of the buildings. We do have a list that subject to advice from my council colleagues, could be distributed, I guess. Yeah.
I wanted to say well done for being on target to meet the tenancy audits by the end of the 3 years. I think Councillor Hogg has an interesting point about whether or not we can make some of that information available on a ward-by-ward basis, subject to any privacy issues that there might be, but I would certainly be interested in seeing that. Not only the audit information, but also the non-decent property information on a ward-by-ward basis. I was going to ask Anne, having been in your position for a relatively short while, whether there's anything that you've noticed in terms of the overall management of CBH, whether you've brought anything to that, or there's one thing that you'd like to change in your short time.
Okay, well, first of all, my initial impression has been that the relationship between CBH and CBC is very good, and it's a lot better than a lot of other Elmos around the country. I guess where we're sort of finding, and I'm certainly finding my feet, I mean, I was taken on because I have some commercial experience, but I'm also a chartered director, so I'm very strong on governance. And we always have to look at the role of the CBH board, who are all non-executive directors, including the 4 councillors. And to a certain extent, I have to encourage them when they're in the boardroom at CBH that they are directors of CBH, not representatives of the council, although, of course, they have that scrutiny role as well. So I guess the balance is, and as the relationship progresses, it's how arm's length is arm's length, and just more clarity between what's devolved to the board for decision and how much scrutiny comes back to CBC. And at the moment, we don't have a problem with it. But it is, number one on our risk register, for instance, is, the relationship with CBC and what would happen if the board of CBH wanted to go in one direction which they felt was in the best interest of the company, and CBC actually didn't want us to go that way or wanted us to do something differently. I'm sure because the relationship is as good as it is that we would resolve any of those issues, particularly between Tina and myself. I don't think we are going to get in that position, but you always have to take notice of what risks face the organisation. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. I'll be interested to, assuming I'm here next year, I'd be interested to see what your experience is after having a year plus in the role. My final question is just on the under-occupied council homes and the impact of the bedroom tax on the movement of tenants. I just wonder if we have any idea what the associated costs have been of moving people out of those properties that were deemed to be under-occupied into other properties, the costs both to CBH in terms of redecorating, refurbishing, etc., the homes that have been moved into, the homes that have been moved out of, and also individual costs of moving.
We can certainly give you something. I'd hesitate a little bit, though, because you've also, if you're going to have that calculation, you probably also need to bring in, if someone's moving, say, from a 3-bed down to a 1-bed, and that 3-bed's now available to a new family who hadn't otherwise been housed, what savings might there be on otherwise having to put them in bed and breakfast or in temporary accommodation? What might be the cost to the borough? What might be the cost to the state and not the borough? It's almost a job to know when to stop making that calculation, if you see what I mean. Certainly, we've got an indicative cost that we use, which is the cost of a move, the cost of a transfer. But I would hesitate about a more complicated calculation, because as I say, it's almost a job to know when to stop.
If I could just follow up then, do we have any idea what the cost to individuals is?
We positively encourage, by way of an incentive scheme, residents to what we call trade down. So they have every right in the world to stay in their larger home, but we're positively encouraging them to trade down, and as such they get, with the support of the borough, small recompense for that move in terms of assistance with removal costs. So the actual costs are slight, but I mean I could give you some figures, I guess, but
I would certainly be interested in some specific figures if you do have them, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, I've got you down as the last speaker, so if there's not anybody else, I'll wrap up after that.
Thank you. I'll make the question brief. I don't know about the answer. It's going back to this Creative Business Centre. I wasn't sure, first of all, whether Colchester Borough Homes' management of it is actually just the management of the structure, or whether it was actually managing the use of it as a business centre, and whether it was what sort of responsibility it took on in running this business centre. And if it is running the business centre and sort of controlling what goes on inside it, can we be sure that Colchester Borough Homes has the right experience and skills to do what is a very specialist starting up and maintaining what are mostly IT businesses, whether in fact they are fully qualified to do this job? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to say that no, our role is a much narrower one, and it's just to provide the project management of the building, the making of the original building. So if you're getting an extension at home, you might employ an architect and say, look after this project for me, make the drawings, let the contracts, look after the work. That's our role in that particular project. And then once done, we'll walk away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm just going to continue with the surprising theme, and page 49, slide number 9. The average days to complete a repair. I certainly know of somebody that was waiting for about 18 months, so I'm not quite sure how those averages were worked out. But I do think that one slide that is missing that would be really useful is the number of properties that are actually waiting for repairs at any one time. I mean, I guess that's a difficult one to do, isn't it, really, because this is an annual report, so once they're done, they're done. But it would be nice to know how many properties at the moment are waiting for repairs, and possibly even when they were first reported.
It is a moving feast, of course. We do have, maybe we could do this in steps, because we've got, these are the sort of the top line key performance indicators. We collect an awful lot more data that we share with our board and with council colleagues, that maybe, rather than rewriting this stuff, if we shared the extra data we've got and then see if that question is still relevant, and it might be. I'm sure my guys won't thank me, but I'm sure it's possible to capture everything that's pending in the system, so to give us a snapshot. But what we'll be able to give you is slides similar to this, which will show the number of urgent repairs completed within 24 hours, the number of routine repairs, or urgent repairs, sorry, emergency 24 hours, urgent 7 days, and routine 21 days. And then some others fall outside of that, particularly if they're sort of boundary walls and estates and those sorts of matters. But it might be that if you see that data, it might kind of answer some of your questions. But if it doesn't, so I'll share that through you, if that's all right. And then if it doesn't, then come back to us.
Wonderful, that's very helpful. Thanks ever so much for that. Okay, if no one else,
I was going to ask,
Hogg.
I'm sorry. As someone on a walkabout, and I have numerous fencing issues over St Anne's Estate. surely you would qualify that on what finance is available within that year to carry out the fencing, repairs and renewals. Because there are areas, I could give you a list, in fact I'm going to give you a list, of areas that need addressing which haven't been addressed.
Thank you. Can I just say, as a general comment, what we've done in Colchester over the years, I say we rather generously, but sort of since the war, is we've under-invested in the stock. And what we've managed to do over the last sort of fistful of years, together with the Borough, is we've now got an investment programme that has all of the proper cyclical works in it, and that hasn't always been the case in Colchester, sort of rewirings and painting fascia boards and everything else. And we're still playing catch-up to an extent. But we've also managed, by hook or by crook, to be able to squeeze into that programme fencing programmes, garage remodelling, a number of other examples of the sorts of things that always ended up being at the bottom of the list. And we now have space within the programme.
Garaging is going well.
There you go.
I'd just add that CBH completed over 22,000 individual repairs last year, which gives you some idea. It could be something from a bolt on a toilet seat to something a little bit more substantial. That's 22,000 in a year.
Thank you for that.
I wasn't being critical, Madam Chairman. I honestly, because in specific over repairs. In the main, the overwhelming majority of my tenants are very happy with the repairs programme as it goes, but we do have concerns because if you have areas, and I have a list of areas that really, really do need addressing, and I'm told time after time, yes, we understand that, but there isn't any money in the budget to do it yet. So you just add it to the list.
Yes, that can be frustrating when that hits, but as you say, there's, I guess there is a hierarchy of need, but yeah, I understand your frustrations. Yeah, that's true. But we have been asked to review the performance, which we have done. And be invited to make any recommendations to the portfolio holder on CBH performance management arrangements for 2015-16 and beyond. I think we've captured a few bits along the way, which I have no doubt will be fed back, and you've probably made your own notes as well. I would just like to thank you, thank all three of you very much for coming along and presenting to us. It was really interesting, really informative. And we look forward to hearing from you again next year, hopefully, or before. Yes. Well, there are some things that are going to be fed back anyway, aren't there? So that would be really useful to get those details. And that is our business for the day. So thank you to everybody that's here, and thank you to visiting councillors and visiting officers as well. Thank you.